They said the Duke was broken, a cripple, a failure, a dead bloodline waiting to collapse. And Elara Whitcomb, sold into marriage like livestock, was meant to be his nurse, his pity, his final humiliation before the world devoured what was left of his name. But when she walked into that cold stone manor and saw him sitting in shadow, wheelchair gleaming in the firelight, she didn't see weakness. She saw fury. And the moment their eyes met, she knew this man wasn't dying, he was hunting. This is their story. Stay until the end. Comment with your city so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The carriage rattled over frozen ground, and Elara pressed her gloved hand against the fogged window, watching the manor rise from the mist like a tombstone. Vorn Estate. Even the name tasted like ash. She'd heard the whispers, of course. Everyone had. The Duke who couldn't walk, the Duke who couldn't sire, the Duke whose enemies circled like wolves, waiting for his line to die so they could feast on what remained. Her father had signed the contract without looking at her, without asking, without caring. "You'll marry him," he'd said, voice flat as old wine. "You'll smile, you'll obey, and you'll keep your mouth shut about what you see." Elara had opened her mouth to argue, but her mother's hand had landed on her wrist, sharp, warning. "He's a duke, Elara. Titles don't fall into laps like this." "Titles?" Elara had laughed bitterly. "He's a ruin. Everyone knows it. His enemies are just waiting for him to—" "Then let them wait." Her father stood, brushing imaginary dust from his coat. "You'll go. You'll play the dutiful wife. And when he dies, you'll inherit enough to keep this family from drowning." That was it. The transaction, the sentence. And now here she was, staring at the place where her life would end. The carriage door opened and cold air knifed in. A pale butler stood waiting, his face carved from ice and etiquette. "Lady Whitcomb, welcome to Vorn Estate." Elara stepped down. Her boots crunched against gravel. The manor loomed, stone and iron and silence. "Where is he?" she asked. The butler's expression didn't change. "His Grace is waiting in the study." Of course he was. But the study smelled like old leather and smoke. Heavy curtains blocked the sun. A fire crackled in the hearth, throwing shadows across walls lined with books and maps and weapons. Swords crossed above the mantel like a warning. And there, by the fire, sat Duke Alistair Vorn. Wheelchair, black coat, hands folded in his lap. Elara stopped in the doorway. She'd expected something different, a broken man, a pitiful creature, someone she could dismiss and ignore and survive. But the man watching her now was none of those things. He was tall even sitting down, broad-shouldered, dark hair, sharp jaw, eyes like storm clouds, gray and cold and calculating. There was no self-pity in his posture, no shame, no weakness, just control. "Lady Whitcomb," he said. His voice was low, smooth, dangerous. "You're early. The roads were clear. Or you were eager." Elara stepped inside, letting the door close behind her. "Eager to meet the man I've been sold to?" "Not exactly." His mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Honest. I appreciate that. I didn't come here to lie." "Good." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." It wasn't a request. Elara moved forward, every nerve on edge. She sat, folding her hands in her lap, mirroring his posture. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Alistair spoke. "You know what they say about me. That you're crippled," Elara said bluntly. "That you can't walk. That you can't produce an heir. That your bloodline is dead and your enemies are circling. Anything else?" "That you're weak." His eyes flashed. "And do you believe that?" Elara studied him, the way he held himself, the way his fingers drummed once, just once, against the armrest, the way his gaze never left hers. "No," she said quietly. "I don't." For the first time, Alistair smiled. It was sharp, predatory. "Smart girl." He leaned forward slightly, the firelight catching the angles of his face. "Let me tell you what's true," he said. "I can walk. Not well. Not far. But enough. The wheelchair is insurance. People see a cripple. They assume weakness. They get careless. They talk freely. They make mistakes." Elara's breath caught. "You're pretending." I'm surviving. His voice hardened. The war broke my body, yes. Shattered my hip, cracked ribs, left me half dead in a field while my men burned around me. But I healed. Enough. And when I came home, I realized something. What? The real injury wasn't physical. He sat back, shadows swallowing half his face. I can't father children, Lady Whitcomb. The physicians confirmed it. Something internal, damaged beyond repair. And in a world where power is blood, where legacy is heirs, that makes me expendable. Elara's chest tightened. They want you dead. They want me gone, Alistair corrected. Dead is messy, but if I die without an heir, my estate passes to distant relatives. Weak men. Men who can be bought, controlled, destroyed. My enemies don't need to kill me. They just need to wait. So you hide. I hunt. His voice dropped, lethal and calm. I let them think I'm weak. I let them circle. And when they get close enough, I strike. Elara's pulse hammered. And me? Where do I fit in this? Alistair's gaze locked onto hers. You're not here to be my nurse, or my pity, or my decoration. He leaned forward again, close enough that she could see the scars on his knuckles, the faint line along his jaw. You're here to be my weapon. What? My enemies think I'm alone, vulnerable. But a wife, a smart, ruthless wife, changes everything. They'll underestimate you. They'll think you're just another vapid noblewoman playing dress-up. And while they're busy dismissing you, you'll be watching, listening, learning. Elara's mind raced. You want me to spy? I want you to fight. Alistair's voice was steel. This isn't a marriage, Lady Whitcomb. It's a war. And if you're not willing to bleed for it, you can leave right now. I'll annul the contract, send you home. No harm, no shame. He paused. But if you stay, you fight beside me. You help me destroy the people trying to erase my legacy. And in return, I'll give you something no one else ever has. What's that? Power. The word hung in the air like smoke. Elara stared at him, at the man society had written off, at the Duke who refused to die. And for the first time in years, she felt something stir inside her chest. Not fear, not resignation, hunger. What do I have to do? She asked. Alistair smiled again, slow, dangerous. Everything. The wedding was 3 days later. Small, cold, efficient. A priest, a witness. A contract signed in silence. Elara wore white, Alistair wore black. No flowers, no music, no guests. When the priest said, "You may kiss the bride," Alistair simply nodded. Elara didn't flinch. And when the doors closed behind them, she knew there was no going back. The first test came fast. A week after the wedding, invitations arrived. A gala. Hosted by Countess Marianne Hale, one of the most powerful women in the capital and one of Alistair's most dangerous enemies. She's baiting you, Elara said, holding the gilded card up to the light. She wants to see if you'll show. She wants to see if we'll show, Alistair corrected. He sat by the window, sunlight cutting across his face. A crippled duke and his desperate bride. It's theater, entertainment. So we don't go. No. Alistair turned, eyes sharp. We go, and we make her regret it. Elara frowned. How? By giving her exactly what she expects, and then twisting the knife when she's not looking. The night of the gala, Elara stood in front of the mirror, her reflection almost unrecognizable. The dress was midnight blue, silk that clung and flowed, cut just shy of scandalous. Her hair was pinned high, her throat bare except for a single sapphire pendant, Alistair's gift, cold and glittering. You look lethal, a voice said from the doorway. Elara turned. Alistair stood there, leaning on a cane. Black coat, perfectly tailored. No wheelchair tonight. You're walking, Elara said. I told you, when it matters. He moved forward, slow but steady. Tonight matters. Why? Because Marianne Hale thinks she owns the room, and we're about to prove her wrong. The gala was everything Elara had expected. Crystal chandeliers, gold-trimmed walls, laughter like broken glass. And everywhere, eyes. watching, judging, whispering. That's her, the girl who married the cripple. Look at him. Poor bastard, can barely walk. How long do you think before he collapses? Elara's jaw tightened, but Alistair's hand found hers, steady and warm. Ignore them, he murmured. Let them talk, let them laugh. Why? Because in an hour they'll stop. They descended the staircase together, Alistair leaning on the cane, Elara at his side. And at the bottom, waiting like a spider in silk, stood Countess Marianne Hale. She was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful, sharp, polished, deadly. Duke Vorn, she purred, offering her hand. What a brave appearance. Alistair took her hand, bowing slightly. Countess, you're as radiant as ever, and you're as mobile as I'd hoped. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Tell me, does your lovely bride know what she's gotten herself into? Elara stepped forward, her voice cool. I know exactly what I've gotten into, Countess. Do you? Marianne's smile froze. Bold, she said softly. I like that. Let's hope it lasts. She swept away, leaving a chill in her wake. Alistair leaned close. Well done. Was that the knife twist? No. His eyes followed Marianne across the room. That comes later. An hour passed. Dancing, drinking, small talk sharp as needles. And then Marianne took the stage. My dear friends, she began, voice ringing out. Tonight, we celebrate not just wealth or beauty, but legacy. The bloodlines that built this world, the families that will carry it forward. Her gaze slid to Alistair. Some of us, of course, are more fortunate than others in that regard. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Elara's hand curled into a fist, but Alistair just smiled. And then he stood. The room went silent. He didn't use the cane, didn't wobble, didn't falter. He walked forward, slow and deliberate, every eye locked on him. And when he reached the stage, he turned to face the crowd. Countess Hale is right, he said, voice carrying. Legacy is everything, but legacy isn't just blood. It's not just heirs. It's what you build, what you defend, what you destroy when someone tries to take it from you. He paused, letting the words sink in. Some of you think I'm weak, broken, finished, and you're waiting, patiently, for me to disappear. The room held its breath. I won't. His eyes swept the crowd, landing on faces one by one. And when you finally realize that, it'll be too late. He stepped down, took Elara's hand, and walked out. Behind them, the silence shattered into chaos. In the carriage, Elara couldn't stop shaking. That was insane, she breathed. Alistair leaned back, eyes closed, a faint smile on his lips. That was war. They'll come for you now. Good. He opened his eyes, and they were blazing. Let them come. Elara stared at him, at the man who refused to break, and she realized something. She wasn't just married to a duke. She was married to a hurricane, and she was about to learn how to be the storm. The attack started the next morning, not with swords or fire, but with something far more insidious, whispers that spread through the capital like poison in the water supply. Elara heard them first at the modiste's shop, where she'd gone to order new gloves. Two women stood behind a curtain, voices low but sharp enough to cut. Did you hear? The Duke's wife was seen leaving a physician's office. Already? Poor thing. Probably trying to find someone who can tell her what's wrong with him. I heard she cried the entire carriage ride home. Elara's hand stilled on the velvet sample she'd been examining. She didn't cry. She hadn't been to any physician, but the lie was already loose, already breeding. She paid quickly and left without the gloves. By the time she returned to Vorn Estate, 3 more variations of the rumor had reached her ears. In one version, she'd been seen visiting a fertility specialist. In another, she'd collapsed in public, overcome with grief. In the cruelest iteration, she'd been spotted in the arms of another man, seeking what her husband could never provide. Alistair was in the library when she found him, surrounded by ledgers and maps, his cane propped against the desk. They're spreading lies about me, Elara said without preamble. He didn't look up. I know. You know? Her voice pitched higher. Alistair, they're saying I'm desperate, unfaithful, weak. He finally lifted his eyes. Yes, I heard all 3 versions before breakfast. And you're just sitting here? I'm working. He gestured to the papers. Marianne Hale owns half the textile mills in the Southern District. If I can prove she's been bribing port inspectors to avoid tariffs, I can have her assets frozen within a fortnight. Elara stared at him. They're destroying my reputation, and you're talking about textile mills? Your reputation is a weapon, Elara, one they're trying to dull. Alistair leaned back, studying her. The question is, are you going to let them? What am I supposed to do? Sue every gossip in the capital? No. He smiled, cold and calculating. You're going to make them look like fools. She crossed her arms. How? By showing up, by refusing to hide, by walking into every room they think you'll avoid and daring them to say it to your face. He stood, slow but steady, and moved around the desk. They want you to crumble, to prove you're exactly what they think, a frightened girl who made a bad bargain. So don't be that. What should I be? Terrifying. The word landed between them like a blade. Elara swallowed hard. I don't know how to be terrifying. Yes, you do. Alistair stepped closer, close enough that she could see the storm in his eyes. You walked away from your family. You married a man everyone said was broken. You stood in front of the Countess Hale and didn't blink. You already know how to fight, Elara. You just need to stop apologizing for it. Her chest tightened. Not with fear, with something raw. There's a luncheon tomorrow, Alistair continued. Lady Pemberton's estate. Half the women spreading those rumors will be there. You want me to go? I want you to perform. He turned back to his desk, rifling through papers until he found what he was looking for, a small velvet box. He handed it to her. Inside was a ring, ruby, set in silver, intricate and old. This belonged to my grandmother, Alistair said. She wore it the day she walked into Parliament and demanded voting rights. They laughed at her. She bankrupted 3 of them within a year. Elara looked up at him. Why are you giving this to me? Because you're going to need a reminder. His voice softened, just slightly. You're not fighting for me, Elara. You're fighting for you, for the right to exist in a world that wants you silent. And if you're going to do that, you need to look the part. She closed the box, her fingers trembling slightly. What if I fail? Then we both burn. Alistair met her gaze, unflinching. But I don't think you will. The morning of the luncheon, Elara dressed like she was going to war. Emerald silk, the ruby ring on her finger, her hair swept up to show the column of her throat. No softness, no apology. The Pemberton estate was all manicured gardens and false smiles. Women clustered in groups, their laughter bright and brittle as glass. Elara walked in alone. Alistair had insisted. They need to see you're not hiding behind me, he'd said. Show them you don't need protection. Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one walking into a den of vipers. Lady Pemberton greeted her at the door, all charm and venom. Lady Vaughan, how unexpected. We weren't sure you'd come. Why wouldn't I? Elara smiled, sharp as the ring on her finger. Oh, no reason. Just, well, you know how people talk. I do, and I find it fascinating how much energy people waste on other people's lives. Elara stepped past her, heading for the garden. Especially when their own are so dreadfully boring. Behind her, Lady Pemberton's smile froze. The garden was worse. Dozens of women, all watching, all waiting for her to falter. Elara poured herself tea, her hand steady, and sat at a table in the center of the lawn. Visible. Unavoidable. Within minutes, the whispers started. Is that her? Bold of her to show her face. I heard she's already looking for a way out of the marriage. Elara sipped her tea, set down the cup, and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. If any of you have questions about my marriage, you're welcome to ask me directly. I promise I'm far more interesting than whatever fantasy you've concocted. Silence crashed down like a guillotine. Then, from across the garden, a woman stood. Lady Caroline Trask, young, sharp-featured, married to a minor lord with major debts. All right, Caroline said, walking closer. I'll bite. Is it true your husband can't perform his duties? Gasps rippled through the crowd. Elara didn't flinch. My husband performs plenty of duties, Lady Trask, running an estate, managing investments, destroying people who underestimate him. She paused, letting the words settle. As for what happens in our private chambers, well, that's none of your concern. Unless you're volunteering to watch. Caroline's face went scarlet. No, I just... Then perhaps you should focus on your own marriage. Elara's voice dropped, cold and precise. I hear your husband's gambling debts are nearing 10,000 pounds. How's that for private business? Caroline's mouth opened, closed. She turned and fled. The garden erupted into chaos, half shocked, half delighted. Elara stood, smoothed her skirt, and walked out. Her hands didn't start shaking until she was back in the carriage. When she returned to Vorn Estate, Alistair was waiting in the entrance hall, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Well? He asked. Elara pulled off her gloves, tossed them onto a side table. I made Caroline Trask cry and probably started 6 new rumors about myself. A slow smile spread across Alistair's face. Perfect. Perfect? I just threw gasoline on the fire. No, you took control of it. He moved closer, his limp barely noticeable now. They wanted to see you weak. Instead, they saw someone who fights back. That's power, Elara. That's how you win. She sank into a chair, exhaustion hitting her like a wave. It doesn't feel like winning. It never does. Not at first. Alistair sat across from her, his gaze softening. But trust me, by tonight, every person in that garden will be reevaluating their position, and by tomorrow they'll be wondering what else you know. I don't know anything. They don't know that. Elara laughed despite herself, raw and tired. You're insane. So are you. That's why this works. For a moment, they just looked at each other. No pretense, no performance. Just 2 people standing in the ruins of their lives, trying to build something new. Then Alistair's expression shifted, hardened. We have a problem, he said. Elara sat up straighter. What kind of problem? The kind that's been waiting for us to get distracted. He pulled a letter from his coat, tossed it onto the table between them. This arrived an hour ago, from Lord Greaves. Elara picked it up, scanned the contents. Her blood went cold. He's challenging your claim to the Northern Estates? Not challenging, disputing. Says my father's will was vague, that without an heir the land should revert to the crown, which conveniently means it'll be auctioned off to the highest bidder. Alistair's jaw tightened, and Greaves just happens to have the crown's ear. Can he do that? He's already done it. The hearing is in 2 weeks. Elara's mind raced. What do we need? Proof of my father's intent. Witnesses. Documents. Anything that shows the land was meant to stay with the Vorn line, heir or no heir. He stood, pacing now despite the cane. But my father burned most of his personal papers before he died. Paranoid bastard thought someone would use them against him. So we have nothing. We have 2 weeks. Alistair stopped, turned to face her. And we have you. Me? Greaves won't expect you to be involved. He sees you as decoration, a distraction. Alistair's eyes blazed. But if you can get close to his wife, Lydia Greaves, she might let something slip. She keeps his secrets. She always has. Elara's stomach twisted. You want me to befriend her? I want you to infiltrate. Learn what he's planning. Find out what leverage he has. Alistair moved closer, his voice low and urgent. Can you do that? She thought about the luncheon, the lies, the fight. She thought about the woman she was becoming. Yes, she said. I can. The next week was a blur of carefully orchestrated encounters. Elara showed up at the same shops as Lydia Greaves, the same galleries, the same charity events. At first, Lydia was cold, distant, but Elara was patient. She complimented Lydia's taste, asked her advice, played the role of the young wife, lost and seeking guidance. And slowly, Lydia warmed. You remind me of myself, Lydia said one afternoon over tea. I married young too, into a world I didn't understand. It's terrifying, Elara confessed. Everyone expects so much, and I feel like I'm constantly failing. Lydia's expression softened. You're not failing, dear. You're surviving. There's a difference. Is there? There has to be. Lydia stirred her tea, her gaze distant. Otherwise, what's the point? Elara saw the opening, took it. Can I ask you something? She said quietly. How do you handle it when your husband makes decisions you don't agree with? Lydia's spoon stilled. What do you mean? Sometimes Alistair does things, legal things, business things, and I worry about the consequences, about what people will think. Elara leaned forward, lowering her voice. Does Lord Greaves ever do things that make you uncomfortable? For a moment, Lydia said nothing. Then, all the time. The words were barely a whisper. Elara's heart hammered. Like what? Lydia looked around as if checking for listeners. Then she leaned closer. He's trying to take your husband's land, she said. The northern estates. He's been planning it for months. Why? Because there's something there. Something valuable. Lydia's eyes were wide, frightened. I don't know what. He won't tell me, but he's obsessed with it. Keeps saying once he has those estates, we'll be untouchable. Elara forced herself to stay calm. What kind of valuable? I don't know, but he has maps. Hidden in his study. And letters. Correspondences with someone at the Crown. Lydia's voice dropped even lower. He's been bribing officials, Elara. Falsifying documents. Whatever's on that land, he's willing to destroy your husband to get it. Elara's mind raced. Lydia, if you know this, I can't say anything. Lydia pulled back, fear etched into every line of her face. If he finds out I told you, he'll... She stopped, swallowed. I've said too much already. No, you've said exactly enough. Elara reached across the table, squeezed Lydia's hand. Thank you. Lydia looked at her, eyes glistening. Be careful, Elara. My husband doesn't lose. And he doesn't forgive. That night, Elara told Alistair everything. He listened, his expression carved from stone. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then, maps, letters, in his study. That's what she said. We need them. Elara blinked. What? If Greaves has been falsifying documents, bribing officials, if we can prove it, we don't just win the hearing, we destroy him. Alistair's eyes burned. We need those papers. How are we supposed to get them? Break into his study? Yes. The word dropped like a stone. Elara stared at him. You're serious? Completely. Alistair moved to the desk, pulling out blueprints. Floor plans of the Greaves estate. He's hosting a ball in 3 days. Half the capital will be there, including us. And while we're at the ball, we just sneak into his study? While you're at the ball keeping him distracted, I'll be in his study. Alistair looked up, meeting her gaze. This is the play, Elara. It's risky, it's dangerous, but if we pull it off, and if we don't, then we lose everything. Elara's throat tightened. He could have you arrested, killed. He could. Alistair's voice was steady. But he won't, because he doesn't know we're coming. She looked at the blueprints, at the maps, at the man who refused to break. All right, she said. Let's do it. The night of the ball, Elara wore red, blood dark and dangerous. The Greaves estate was a fortress of marble and gold, packed with glittering bodies and false laughter. Alistair walked beside her, leaning on his cane, playing the part of the weakened duke. Remember, he murmured as they entered, keep Greaves occupied. Make him think you're there to negotiate, to beg. I don't beg. Tonight you do. He squeezed her hand once, brief and grounding. I'll be back in 20 minutes. Then he slipped away, vanishing into the crowd. Elara took a breath, straightened her spine, and went hunting. She found Lord Greaves near the wine table, holding court with a circle of sycophants. He was tall, barrel-chested, with the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. Lord Greaves, Elara said, stepping into the circle. Might I have a word? He turned, eyebrows lifting. Lady Vorn, what a surprise. I'm sure. She gestured away from the group. Privately? Greaves studied her for a moment, then nodded. He followed her onto the balcony, away from the noise. What can I do for you, my lady? He asked, his tone dripping condescension. You can stop trying to steal my husband's land, Elara said bluntly. Greaves laughed. Steal? That's a harsh word. It's an accurate one. His smile faded. Your husband is in no position to hold those estates. No heir, no future. The crown has every right to reclaim. The crown has no right to anything unless you've bought that right. Elara stepped closer, her voice dropping. I know what you're doing, Lord Greaves, and I know why. For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Uncertainty. You don't know anything, he said. Don't I? She tilted her head. Then why do you look nervous? His jaw tightened. Careful, Lady Vorn, you're playing a game you don't understand. Maybe. Or maybe I understand it better than you think. They stared at each other, the air between them electric with threat. Then, from inside, a shout. Guards! Someone's in the study! Elara's blood turned to ice. Greaves' eyes widened, then narrowed. Your husband! He hissed, and he ran. Elara didn't think. She just moved, hiking up her skirts and sprinting after him, her heart in her throat. The study doors were open. Inside, Alistair stood by the desk, papers clutched in his hands, his cane on the floor. 2 guards blocked the exit. Greaves shoved past them, his face purple with rage. You dare! Alistair looked up, calm as death. I dare. Those are private document. They're evidence. Alistair held up the papers. Of bribery, forgery, treason. Greaves lunged. Alistair didn't flinch. He simply stepped aside and Greaves crashed into the desk. Touch me again, Alistair said softly, and I'll make sure these papers reach the Crown by morning. Greaves froze. Alistair turned to the guards. Let us pass. Don't you move. Greaves started. They'll move. Alistair's voice was iron. Because if they don't, I'll assume they're complicit. And complicit men hang. The guards looked at each other, then stepped aside. Alistair walked out, Elara at his side, the papers clutched like a weapon. Behind them, Greaves's roar echoed through the halls. In the carriage, Elara couldn't breathe. That was insane, she gasped. He almost caught you, but he didn't. Alistair spread the papers across his lap, his hands steady despite everything. And now we have him. What if he comes after us? He will. Alistair looked up, his eyes blazing with something wild and fierce. But it won't matter, because by the time he does, he'll have nothing left. Elara stared at him, at the man who'd just walked into enemy territory and walked back out with the kill. You're terrifying, she whispered. Alistair smiled. So are you. And for the first time, she believed him. The papers hit the desk like a judgment. Alistair spread them out, maps marked with mining coordinates, letters sealed with the royal crest, ledgers documenting bribes paid to harbor masters and magistrates. Every piece of Greaves's conspiracy laid bare under the lamplight. Elara stood by the window, still trembling from adrenaline. What do we do with them? We go public. Alistair's finger traced a line on one of the maps. But not yet. Greaves will expect us to run straight to the authorities. He'll have countermoves prepared, witnesses bought, stories ready. So we wait? We strike where he's not looking. Alistair looked up, his face sharp in the shadows. The northern estates, there's iron ore under that land. Massive deposits, enough to supply half the kingdom's foundries for decades. That's what Greaves wants. That's what he's been hiding. Elara moved closer, studying the maps. If the Crown knew, the Crown does know, or at least certain members of it. He tapped one of the letters. Lord Chancellor Whitmore. He's been taking Greaves's money for years, smoothing over legal challenges, burying reports. They're both counting on me dying without an heir so they can carve up the estate between them. Then we expose them both. We can't. Not directly. Alistair's jaw tightened. Whitmore controls the courts. Any evidence we present, he'll suppress or discredit. We need leverage that even he can't touch. Like what? Like the king? Elara's breath caught. You want to go to the king? I want to make the king come to us. Alistair began gathering the papers, moving with focused intensity despite his limp. There's a winter gala at the palace in 5 days. Every noble family will be there, including Greaves and Whitmore. And you plan to do what? Stand up in the middle of a ball and accuse them of treason? Something like that. His smile was dangerous. But first we need insurance, because the moment we make this public, they'll try to destroy us. Not legally, physically. The word hung in the air like smoke. You think they'll kill us? Elara's voice came out steadier than she felt. I think they'll try. Alistair moved around the desk, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. This isn't a game anymore, Elara. We're threatening powerful men, men who've already killed to protect their secrets. How do you know that? Because my father was one of those secrets. The words came out flat, emotionless. He found out about the iron ore 20 years ago. started asking questions. 3 months later, he was dead. Heart failure, they said. But his physician told me the symptoms looked like poison. Elara's chest constricted. Alistair, I never had proof. Still don't. But I know what I know. He turned away, staring at the maps. That's why I've been careful. Why I've played the cripple, the dying duke. Let them think I was too weak to be a threat. But now we have evidence, and once we use it, there's no going back. She should have been terrified. Should have run. Instead, she asked, "What do you need me to do?" He looked at her then, something raw flickering across his face. "I need you to trust me, even when it looks like I'm losing, even when it looks like we're finished. I do trust you." "You shouldn't." His voice cracked slightly. "I've dragged you into a war you didn't ask for, given you enemies who want you dead. If you want out, now's the time. I'll arrange passage to the continent, money, protection, a new name. Stop." Elara crossed the space between them, grabbed his hand. "I'm not leaving. Elara, I'm not leaving." She squeezed harder. "You think I don't know what this is? You think I haven't figured out that we're probably going to die? I'm not stupid, Alistair. I'm just not scared anymore." His eyes searched hers. "You should be, maybe. But I'm tired of living small, tired of being what other people expect." She held his gaze. "You gave me a choice. Fight or flee. I chose fight. I'm not changing my mind now." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Alistair pulled her close, his forehead dropping to hers. "You're going to get us both killed." "Probably." She smiled against the nearness. "But at least we'll die interesting." His laugh was low, almost broken. "I don't deserve you. Good thing I'm not here because you deserve me." They stayed like that, breathing the same air, until the clock struck midnight. Then Alistair pulled back, his expression hardening again. "We have work to do." The next 3 days were brutal. Alistair barely slept, coordinating with the few allies he still trusted. Minor nobles who'd suffered under Greaves's schemes, merchants who'd been extorted, soldiers who'd served under Alistair's command during the war and remembered. Elara played a different role. She visited Lydia Greaves one last time. They met at a tea house, quiet and dim. Lydia looked thinner than before, shadows under her eyes. "You shouldn't have come," Lydia whispered. "He knows you took the papers. He's furious." "I'm not here about the papers." Elara leaned forward. "I'm here about you." Lydia blinked. "What?" "Come with us. Testify against him. We can protect you." "No." Lydia shook her head violently. "You don't understand. He'll kill me. Not metaphorically, actually kill me." "He'll kill you anyway if you stay." Elara's voice dropped. "You know too much, Lydia. The moment he thinks you're a liability, I'm his wife. That won't save you." Elara reached across the table, gripped her hand. "Please, we have a chance to stop him, but we need you." Lydia's eyes filled with tears. "Can't. I'm sorry. I can't." She pulled away and fled, leaving Elara alone with cold tea and colder certainty. Some people couldn't be saved. The night of the palace gala, snow fell thick and heavy, blanketing the city in white silence. Elara dressed in midnight blue silk, the ruby ring on her finger, her hair pinned with silver combs that could double as weapons if needed. Alistair had insisted. "Expect anything," he'd said. "Trust no one." He wore black velvet, no cane tonight, though she knew every step cost him. His face was carved from determination and rage. They arrived separately. Alistair with his advisors, Elara with a group of younger nobles. The strategy was simple. Don't look united. Don't give anyone a target. The palace was obscene in its beauty, crystal chandeliers the size of carriages, gold leaf on every surface, a string orchestra playing something haunting and cold. Elara spotted Greaves across the ballroom, holding court near the throne dais. He saw her too. His smile was a promise of violence. Near the windows, Lord Chancellor Whitmore stood surrounded by functionaries, his expression smooth as marble. And at the center of it all, on a throne raised 3 steps above the crowd, sat King Edmund, old, tired, draped in ermine and indifference. Alistair appeared at her elbow. "Ready?" "No." "Good, neither am I." He took her hand and led her onto the dance floor. They moved through a waltz, his steps halting but precise. Around them, the crowd watched, whispered, judged. "When?" Elara murmured. "Soon. I need Greaves close to the king. Need Whitmore isolated." His eyes tracked the room like a predator. "There. Greaves is moving toward the dais. When the music ends, we go." The final notes swelled, died. Alistair released her hand and walked straight toward the throne. The crowd parted, confused, curious. Greaves froze mid-sentence, his face draining of color. Alistair stopped at the base of the dais, 3 steps below the king, and spoke loud enough for the entire ballroom to hear. "Your Majesty, I come before you tonight to expose a conspiracy that threatens the crown." The room erupted into chaos. Guards moved forward, but the king raised one hand. "Speak, Duke Vorn." Alistair pulled the papers from his coat, held them high. "Lord Greaves has been bribing officials, falsifying land claims, and conspiring to seize crown lands illegally. He's done this with the help of your Lord Chancellor." Whitmore stepped forward, his voice oily with confidence. "This is absurd. The Duke is clearly unwell. The Duke has evidence, Ishmaels." Alistair threw the papers at Whitmore's feet. "Maps. Letters bearing your seal. Ledgers documenting every bribe. All of it." Greaves lunged forward. "He stole those documents. Broke into my home like a common thief." "Because you were hiding a crime." Alistair's voice cut through the noise. "You discovered iron ore on my family's land. Instead of reporting it to the crown, you tried to steal the land for yourself. You bribed Whitmore to smooth the legal path. And you waited for me to die without an heir so you could carve up my legacy." The king leaned forward, his eyes suddenly sharp. "Is this true?" "Of course not," Whitmore began. "Your Majesty." A new voice. A woman's voice. Lydia Greaves stepped from the crowd, her face pale but determined. Elara's heart stopped. Lydia moved toward the dais, her hands shaking. "It's true. All of it. My husband has been planning this for years. I have the original maps, the correspondence, everything the Duke claims." "Lydia!" Greaves' voice was pure threat. "I'm sorry." Lydia looked at him, tears streaming. "But I'm done being afraid." She pulled a leather folder from her cloak, handed it to the nearest guard. Greaves roared and charged. Not at Lydia, at Alistair. He moved fast, faster than anyone expected, a knife appearing in his hand. Alistair saw it coming, tried to move, but his damaged leg buckled. The blade arced down. Elara screamed and threw herself forward, crashing into Greaves' side. They went down together, hitting the marble hard. The knife skittered away. Guards swarmed, dragging Greaves back, pinning him. Elara rolled to her hands and knees, gasping. Alistair was on the floor beside her, his face twisted in pain but alive. Alive. "You idiot," he rasped. "He could have killed you. He could have killed you." Her voice shook. "So we're even." The guards hauled Greaves to his feet. He was screaming, incoherent with rage. Whitmore tried to slip away, but more guards blocked his path. The king stood, his voice ringing out. "Arrest them both. Lord Greaves, Lord Chancellor Whitmore. Hold them for trial." The ballroom dissolved into pandemonium. Alistair struggled to his feet, ignoring offered hands. Elara stood beside him, her dress torn, her hair falling loose. Together, they faced the king. "Duke Vorn," the king said slowly, "you've made serious accusations. If they prove false, they won't." Alistair's voice was iron. "Everything I've said can be verified. And if your Majesty examines those documents, you'll find enough evidence to hang both men twice over." The king studied him, then nodded. "We shall see." He gestured, and guards escorted Alistair and Elara to a side chamber. The door closed, muffling the chaos outside. Elara collapsed into a chair, her entire body shaking. "We did it!" "Maybe." Alistair leaned against the wall, his face gray with pain. "Or we just signed our death warrants." "What do you mean?" "Greaves has allies. Whitmore has more. Even if the king believes us, even if they're arrested—" He stopped, breathing hard. "Powerful men don't go down quietly. They'll send assassins, mercenaries. They'll burn Vorn estate to the ground if they have to." "Then what do we do?" "We prepare for war." He looked at her, something fierce and desperate in his eyes. "The legal battle is won, but the real fight is just starting." Before Elara could respond, the door burst open. A guard stumbled in, blood pouring from a wound in his side. "They're coming," he gasped. "Greaves' men, inside the palace." Alistair shoved away from the wall. "How many?" "Dozens. They breached the east wing." An explosion rocked the building. Screams echoed from the ballroom. Alistair grabbed Elara's hand. "Run." They ran. Through corridors filled with smoke and panic, past nobles fleeing in terror, through doorways that led deeper into the palace labyrinth. Behind them, the sounds of fighting grew closer. "There!" Alistair pointed to a servant's entrance. "That leads to the gardens." A figure stepped from the shadows. Greaves. His face was split in a bloody grin, a sword in his hand. "You really thought I'd let you walk away?" 3 more men appeared behind him. Mercenaries, by the look of them. Alistair pushed Elara behind him. "Go." "I'm not leaving." "Go!" One of the mercenaries lunged. Alistair met him with a candlestick ripped from the wall, catching the blade and twisting. The mercenary screamed as his wrist shattered, but there were too many. Greaves advanced, his sword raised. Elara grabbed a shard of broken mirror from the floor, sharp and deadly. "You want to kill us?" she snarled. "You're going to have to work for it." Greaves laughed. "With pleasure." He swung. Alistair blocked with the candlestick, but the force drove him back. His leg gave out and he fell. Greaves raised the sword for a killing blow. Elara moved without thinking. She lunged, the mirror shard flashing, and drove it into Greaves's shoulder. He howled and spun, backhanding her across the face. She hit the wall hard, stars exploding across her vision. Through the blur she saw Alistair on the ground, Greaves standing over him, sword raised. "No!" The sword came down. A gunshot cracked through the corridor. Greaves staggered. Blood bloomed across his chest. He turned, confused. Lydia stood at the end of the hall, a smoking pistol in her shaking hands. "I said I was done being afraid," she whispered. Greaves collapsed. The mercenaries scattered, fleeing into the smoke. Guards poured in from all directions, securing the corridor. Elara crawled to Alistair, her hands finding his face. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine." He pulled her close, his grip almost painful. "Are you?" "I'm fine." They were both lying. Around them, the palace burned. The palace burned for 3 hours before the guards got it under control. By dawn, the east wing was gutted, the ballroom a charred skeleton, and 7 nobles were dead, including Lord Chancellor Whitmore, who'd been trampled in the chaos trying to flee. Greaves survived Lydia's bullet, but barely. The physician said he'd live long enough to stand trial. Elara sat in a borrowed chamber, her face bruised, her dress ruined, watching smoke rise against the gray morning sky. Alistair stood by the window, leaning heavily on a cane again. His leg had given out completely during the fight. The physicians had wrapped it tight, warned him not to walk for days. He'd ignored them. "They're calling it an insurrection," he said quietly. "Greaves' final play. Half the capital thinks he was trying to overthrow the king." "Wasn't he?" "No, he was trying to kill us before we could testify." Alistair turned from the window. "But the narrative works in our favor. Makes him look like a traitor. Makes us look like heroes." "We're not heroes." "I know." He moved toward her, each step visible pain. "But we're alive, and they're not." Elara looked up at him. At the exhaustion carved into his face, the blood still dried in his hair from where he'd been thrown against stone. "Lydia saved us," she said. "I know." "Where is she?" Being questioned. The king wants to know how much she knew, how long she knew it. He sat down beside Elara, his breath hissing through his teeth. "She'll probably be exiled, stripped of title, but alive. That's more than she had yesterday." "Yes." They sat in silence, watching the smoke. Finally, Alistair spoke. "The king wants to see us, both of us. This afternoon." Elara's stomach twisted. "What for?" "To determine if we're criminals or patriots." His smile was bitter. "Breaking into Greaves' estate, stealing documents, causing a massacre at a royal event. Those aren't exactly acts of loyal subjects. We exposed a conspiracy, with stolen evidence, acquired through illegal means." He rubbed his face. "The law doesn't care about intentions, Elara, only actions. So what do? We face it, together." He took her hand, his grip warm and solid. Whatever comes next. The king received them in a private study, not the throne room. A small mercy. He sat behind a massive desk, looking older than he had at the gala. Tired. The attack had rattled him. Duke Vorn, Lady Vorn. His voice was rough. Sit. They sat. The king studied them for a long moment. Then he pushed a folder across the desk. I've reviewed the documents you provided. Had my own investigators verify their authenticity. He paused. Everything you claimed was true. Greaves was bribing officials. Whitmore was complicit. The iron ore deposits on your land are real and substantial. Elara felt something loosen in her chest. Relief. Vindication. However, the king continued, the methods you used to obtain this evidence were illegal, breaking and entering, theft, inciting violence at a royal event. We didn't incite, Alistair began. You brought a war into my palace. The king's eyes hardened. 7 people died last night. Dozens more were injured. Part of my ancestral home is rubble. You may have been right about the conspiracy, Duke Vorn, but you were reckless in how you exposed it. I did what was necessary. You did what was expedient. The king leaned forward, and now I have to decide whether to reward you or punish you. Silence stretched taut. Elara couldn't stay quiet. Your Majesty, with respect, my husband tried to bring this to you through legal channels. He tried to use the courts, but Whitmore controlled the courts. Greaves controlled the judges. Every legitimate path was blocked. So you took an illegitimate one. We took the only one left. Her voice shook but held. And if we hadn't, Greaves would have stolen those lands, Whitmore would have covered it up, and your Majesty would never have known the crown was being robbed blind. The king's expression didn't change. You're asking me to excuse your crimes because the outcome was favorable. I'm asking you to recognize that sometimes the system breaks. And when it does, people have to make impossible choices. The king sat back, his fingers drumming on the desk. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled, just slightly. You're bold, Lady Vorn. I'll give you that. He looked at Alistair. You married well. I know. Very well. The king pulled out a document, signed it with a flourish. The charges against you are dismissed. Officially, you are acting as agents of the crown, investigating corruption at my request. That's the story. Memorize it. Alistair blinked. Your Majesty, don't make me regret this, Vorn. The king's voice hardened again. You've embarrassed powerful people, made enemies who won't forget. I can protect you from legal consequences, but I can't protect you from everything. I understand. Do you? The king stood, and they stood with him. Your lands are secure. The iron ore is yours to manage, but manage it wisely. Don't give anyone an excuse to come after you again. He moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing, about your situation. Elara's breath caught. I know you can't produce an heir, the king said bluntly. The whole capital knows, and I know that makes you vulnerable. Alistair's jaw tightened. Yes, Your Majesty. So here's what I'm going to do. The king pulled another document from his coat. I'm issuing a royal decree. Your title and lands will pass not through bloodline, but through appointment. When you die, you may designate your successor, blood relation or not. The words landed like a thunderclap. That's unprecedented, Alistair said slowly. So is everything about this situation. The king handed him the decree. Consider it payment for exposing Whitmore, and insurance against anyone else trying to steal your legacy. He opened the door. Now get out of my palace before something else explodes. They left in stunned silence. Outside, the morning had turned bright and cold. Snow crunched under their feet as they walked toward the waiting carriage. Halfway there, Alistair stopped. He just changed the law, he said, staring at the decree in his hands. For us. I know. This means, his voice cracked. This means it doesn't matter. The infertility, the lack of an heir, none of it matters anymore. Elara turned to face him. It never mattered. Not really. Yes, it did. It made me weak. Made me a target. It made you human. She stepped closer. And it made you fight harder than anyone else would have. You didn't just defend your legacy, Alistair. You redefined it. He looked at her, something raw and overwhelming in his eyes. Then he pulled her close and kissed her, hard and desperate and real. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "We need to go home," Alistair said, "before I collapse in the middle of the palace grounds." That would be embarrassing. Extremely. They made it to the carriage. Barely. The ride back to Vorn Estate took 2 hours. Alistair slept most of the way, his head on Elara's shoulder, his exhaustion finally catching up. She watched the countryside pass, snow-covered fields, bare trees, smoke rising from distant chimneys. It looked the same as it had weeks ago. But everything had changed. They'd won. Actually, impossibly won. When they arrived at Vorn Estate, the household staff lined up to greet them, their faces a mixture of relief and awe. "Welcome home, Your Grace. My lady." Elara helped Alistair inside, his weight heavy against her side. The butler took one look at them and immediately sent for the physician. "I don't need—" Alistair began. "You absolutely do," Elara cut him off. "Sit down before you fall down." He sat, more from lack of choice than agreement. The physician arrived, examined Alistair's leg, and declared it a miracle he could walk at all. "You've done permanent damage," the physician said bluntly. "The muscle is torn, the bone fractured in 2 places. You need rest, months of it." "I don't have months." "Then you'll be crippled for real." The physician packed his instruments. "Your choice, Your Grace." He left. Alistair stared at the floor. "I can't just sit here for months. There's too much to do. The estates need managing. The iron ore needs—" "I'll handle it," Elara said. He looked up. "What?" "The estates. The ore. All of it." She sat down across from him. "You've been carrying this alone for years. Let me carry some of it. You don't know how— Then teach me." Her voice was steady. "You said we were partners. Prove it. Trust me to do this." Alistair studied her. Then, slowly, he nodded. "All right." Over the next weeks, Elara learned to run a duchy. It was brutal. Endless meetings with stewards and mine foremen and merchants. Ledgers that didn't balance, disputes between tenants. Contract negotiations that went in circles. But she learned fast. She had to. Alistair taught her everything. How to read a balance sheet, how to spot when someone was lying, how to negotiate without giving ground. He was a relentless teacher, sharp and demanding. And she was a quick student. Within a month, she was handling most of the day-to-day operations. Within 2, she was making decisions without consulting him first. The estate managers were skeptical at first. A woman managing the duchy? Unprecedented, improper. But Elara didn't care about precedent. When the iron ore mine flooded and the foreman wanted to abandon it, she went down herself to inspect the damage. Came back covered in mud and declared they'd install pumps, not quit. When a merchant tried to underbid on a shipment contract, she walked away from the table. He came back 2 days later with a fair offer. When rumors started circulating that the Duke was too ill to rule, that his wife was overstepping, Elara showed up at the next regional council meeting alone. "My husband is recovering," she said calmly. "In the meantime, I speak with his full authority. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with the king." No one did. Slowly, the whispers changed. Not about scandal or impropriety, about respect. Alistair watched it happen from the study, his leg propped up, a mixture of pride and something else on his face. "You're better at this than I am," he said one evening. Elara looked up from the contracts she was reviewing. "That's not true." "It is. You don't carry the weight of history, the expectations." He gestured to the portraits on the walls, generations of Vorn men, all stern and proper. "You just do what needs doing." "So do you." "I do what I think I'm supposed to do. There's a difference." She set down her pen. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe I've been fighting the wrong battle." He stood, testing his weight on the leg, still weak, but healing. "I spent years trying to prove I was worthy of this title, worthy of the name. But maybe worth isn't about living up to dead men's expectations." "Then what's it about?" "Building something new." He moved to the window, looking out over the estate. "That decree the king gave us, it means we can choose our successor, choose what this legacy becomes. We don't have to decide that now." "No, but we do have to start thinking about it." He turned to face her. "Because sooner or later someone's going to ask, What happens to the Vorn Duchy when we're gone? We tell them it goes to someone we trust, someone who'll fight to protect it. And if no one like that exists, then we create them. Elara stood, crossing to stand beside him. We build schools, train leaders, invest in the next generation. Legacy doesn't have to be blood, Alistair. It can be influence, ideas, change. He looked at her for a long moment. When did you get so wise? About 3 minutes ago. I'm making this up as I go. He laughed, real and unguarded. So am I. 3 months after the palace attack, the first delegation arrived from the capital. Not enemies, allies. Minor nobles who'd suffered under Greaves' schemes, merchants who'd been extorted by Whitmore's network, even a few former soldiers who'd served with Alistair during the war. They came seeking guidance, protection, alliance. They see what you've built, one of them said to Alistair. A house that can't be destroyed through bloodline. A legacy that isn't dependent on heirs. That's revolutionary, Your Grace. It's survival, Alistair replied. Maybe. But it's also hope. The delegations kept coming. More nobles, more merchants, even a few magistrates looking to escape the corrupted system in the capital. Vorn Estate became something unexpected, a refuge, a symbol. And Elara and Alistair became something they'd never intended, leaders of a movement. This is getting out of hand, Elara said one night, staring at the stack of requests for audience. We can't meet with all these people. We have to, Alistair said, because if we don't, someone else will, and they might not have good intentions. So what do? We formalize it, create a council, people we trust to help make decisions, to carry out policies, to be the face of this, whatever this is becoming, a coalition, a threat to the old order. He smiled grimly. But yes, a coalition. They worked through the night, drafting proposals, reaching out to allies, building infrastructure for something that didn't yet have a name. By dawn, they had the skeleton of a plan, and by the end of the week, they had their first official meeting. 12 people gathered in the Vorn Library, nobles, merchants, scholars, soldiers, united not by blood or tradition, but by a shared belief that the system was broken and needed rebuilding. Alistair stood at the head of the table, no wheelchair, no cane, just himself. Thank you for coming, he said. I know most of you took risks to be here, risks to your reputations, your businesses, your safety. I don't take that lightly. He paused, looking at each face. We're here because the old ways are failing. Power concentrated in bloodlines, passed down regardless of merit. Corruption protected by tradition. Good people crushed because they weren't born into the right families. His voice hardened. That ends now. How? One of the merchants asked. You're one duke. We're 12 people. The entire nobility is against us. Not all of them, Elara said, speaking for the first time. Just the ones with something to lose, and there are more of us than there are of them. She's right, Alistair added. The king has already shown he's willing to bend tradition. He gave us the power to choose our successor. That's precedent, and precedent can spread. You want to change inheritance law for the entire kingdom? A scholar's voice, skeptical but intrigued. Eventually, but first we change it for ourselves. We prove it works. We show that merit matters more than bloodline. Alistair leaned forward, and we do it one estate, one family, one decision at a time. The room was silent. Then one of the nobles spoke. A young woman, recently widowed, her husband's lands threatened by distant relatives. If I could choose my successor, someone I trust, someone capable, I'd do it, in a heartbeat. So would I, said another. And I. The chorus grew. Alistair and Elara exchanged a look. This was it. The tipping point. Then let's make it happen, Alistair said. Together. The meeting lasted hours. They debated, argued, planned. By the end, they had commitments from 8 of the 12 to petition the king for the same rights Alistair had been granted. It wasn't revolution, but it was the beginning of something. As people filed out, promising to return, promising to spread the word, Elara felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. She found Alistair standing by the library window, watching the sun set over the estate. We did it, she said softly. We started it, he corrected. There's a long way to go. I know. She slipped her hand into his. But we're not alone anymore. No, we're not. They stood together as darkness fell, watching lights flicker on in the village below, people going about their lives, unaware of the quiet revolution beginning in the manor on the hill. Do you think we'll live to see it? Elara asked. The world we're trying to build? I don't know. Alistair squeezed her hand. But I think we'll die knowing we tried. That's enough. Is it? She turned to face him. It has to be. They went inside as the first snow of the season began to fall. Behind them, the estate glowed warm and alive, no longer a dying legacy, but a living one. Built not on blood or tradition, but on choice. And in a world where power had always been inherited, that was the most dangerous thing of all. The resistance came in spring, not with armies or declarations, but with lawyers. 17 noble families filed a joint petition with the king, arguing that the Vorn decree was unconstitutional, that allowing succession by appointment rather than bloodline violated centuries of tradition and threatened the foundation of the monarchy itself. The petition was backed by the old guard, families whose power rested entirely on their lineage, who saw the Vorn model as an existential threat. They're terrified, Alistair said, reading the document for the third time. And they should be. Elara stood by the window of their study, watching workers repair the damaged east wall of the estate. Spring had brought new energy, new growth, but also new battles. How many signatures? She asked. 43 nobles, including 3 dukes. He set the paper down. They're demanding a formal hearing, open court. They want to make an example of us. When? 3 weeks. Elara turned from the window. Can we win? I don't know. Alistair's honesty was sharp. The law is vague. Inheritance has always been bloodline, but it's never been codified as absolute. The king bent tradition for us, but if enough nobles push back, he might reverse course to keep the peace. So we convince them not to push back. How? These are people who've built their entire identities on ancestry. You're asking them to accept that their bloodline doesn't make them special. I'm asking them to accept reality. Elara moved to the desk, her mind already working. Most of these families, how many have strong heirs? Capable ones? Alistair pulled out his notes. Maybe half. The rest have children who are either too young, too incompetent, or too disinterested to manage their estates. And when those weak heirs take over, what happens? The estates decline, sometimes collapse entirely. Exactly, Elara's voice sharpened. They're defending a system that's killing them. We just need to make them see it. They won't listen. Then we make them listen. She grabbed paper, started writing. We need testimonials, evidence, stories of estates ruined by incompetent heirs, numbers showing how merit-based succession could strengthen the nobility, not weaken it. Alistair watched her work, something like awe crossing his face. You're going to build a case. I'm going to build a weapon. She looked up. And we're going to use it to dismantle everything they think they know. The next 3 weeks were war by paperwork. Elara and Alistair reached out to allies, scholars, historians. They gathered data on every noble family in the kingdom, which ones thrived, which ones failed, and most importantly, why. The pattern was damning. Estates managed by capable leaders, regardless of birth order or legitimacy, flourished. Those handed to eldest sons simply because of tradition struggled or collapsed. Look at the Cromwell estate, Elara said, pointing to a chart. The eldest son inherited 5 years ago. In that time, he's lost 30% of the land to debt, driven away half the tenants, and is currently facing 3 lawsuits for negligence. And his younger brother, Alistair asked, runs a successful merchant fleet in the south, built it from nothing. But because he wasn't firstborn, he'll never inherit. That's insane. That's tradition. They collected dozens of similar stories, each one an indictment of the bloodline system. But data alone wouldn't win the hearing. They needed something more visceral. We need someone to stand up in that court and say it, Elara said. Someone the nobles respect. Someone who suffered under the current system. Who? Elara thought for a moment. Then it hit her. Lady Caroline Trask. Alistair frowned. The woman you humiliated at the garden party? The woman whose husband gambled away their fortune while she watched helplessly. Elara's eyes gleamed. She's smart, capable, and trapped in a marriage to an incompetent heir. If we can get her to testify about what it's like to watch everything fall apart, because tradition says she can't take control, she'll never do it. It would ruin her reputation. Maybe, or maybe she's tired of pretending. Elara stood. I'm going to ask her. Elara, trust me. She found Caroline at a charity luncheon, looking thinner than before, her smile brittle. Elara approached carefully. Lady Trask, may I have a moment? Caroline's eyes widened. Lady Vorn, I didn't expect to see you here. I need to talk to you, privately. They stepped into a side room. Caroline crossed her arms defensively. If you're here to humiliate me again, I'm here to offer you a way out, Elara said bluntly. Caroline blinked. What? Your husband is destroying your estate. Everyone knows it, and you're powerless to stop him because the law says the estate is his, not yours, even though you'd manage it better. Caroline's face went pale. How dare you? I'm not judging, I'm offering a solution. Elara pulled out a document. In 3 weeks, there's a hearing about succession law, about whether estates should pass by blood or by merit. I want you to testify. Testify about what? About what it's like to be capable and ignored, to watch everything you care about crumble because tradition values your husband's incompetence over your competence. Caroline's hand shook. You're asking me to destroy my marriage. I'm asking you to save your estate, your people, your future. Elara stepped closer. How much longer can you watch him gamble it all away? I can't, Caroline's voice cracked. If I speak against him publicly, he'll divorce me. I'll have nothing. You already have nothing. He's made sure of that. Elara's voice softened. But if you testify, if you help change the law, you could petition to take control, to save what's left. No one would support that. I would. Alistair would. And so would every other person fighting to break this system. Elara held out the document. You have 3 weeks to decide. But think about this. What kind of legacy do you want? One where you stayed silent and watched everything burn? Or one where you fought for something better? She left Caroline standing there, the document in her trembling hands. 2 days before the hearing, Caroline sent word. She would testify. The hearing was held in the Grand Hall of Parliament, every seat packed with nobles, scholars, and curious onlookers. The 17 families who'd filed the petition sat on one side, their lawyers arrayed like soldiers. Alistair and Elara sat on the other, alone except for their small collection of allies. The king presided from a raised platform, his expression unreadable. Lord Ashford, representing the petitioners, stood first. He was old, silver-haired, his voice carrying the weight of generations. Your Majesty, we stand before you today to defend the very foundation of our society, bloodline, heritage, the sacred bond between father and son that has governed this kingdom for 1,000 years. He gestured toward Alistair. Duke Vorn asks us to abandon that bond, to declare that any person, regardless of birth, can inherit title and land. This is not progress, this is chaos. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the hall. Ashford continued, if we allow this precedent to stand, we open the door to usurpers, opportunists, and commoners seizing what rightfully belongs to noble families. We risk civil war. He sat down to applause. Alistair stood slowly, his cane a deliberate choice. Let them see the limp. Let them remember what he'd sacrificed. Lord Ashford speaks of foundation, Alistair began, his voice clear and steady. But foundations crack. They erode. And when they do, you either reinforce them or watch the whole structure collapse. He moved forward, every eye tracking him. I was born into privilege, into a bloodline stretching back centuries. But privilege doesn't make me capable. Heritage doesn't make me wise. I earned my title by defending this kingdom in war, by managing my estates through crisis, by refusing to let my family's legacy die simply because I can't produce an heir. His gaze swept the room. You want to talk about chaos? Let's talk about incompetent heirs running estates into the ground, about capable younger siblings denied opportunity because of birth order, about entire regions suffering because tradition values blood over skill. He pulled out the documents Elara had compiled. I have evidence. 40 estates in the last decade that failed under traditional succession. 40 families who lost everything because the law said they had to put the eldest son in charge, regardless of his ability. He let that sink in. That's not order, that's stupidity. Gasps, outrage, but also uncertainty. Ashford stood again. You speak of isolated failures. 40 isn't isolated, Alistair cut him off. It's a pattern, and if you're honest, you know there are more. How many of you are watching your own estate struggle under heirs who don't care, who can't manage, who see the title as a birthright rather than a responsibility? Silence. Then Elara stood. She hadn't planned to speak, but the moment demanded it. I'm not nobility, she said, her voice cutting through the tension. I was sold into marriage like property, given to a man society called broken. I had no power, no voice, no future. She looked directly at the king. But when Duke Vorn offered me partnership instead of subservience, when he trusted me to help manage his estates, to make decisions, to fight beside him, I discovered I was capable of more than anyone imagined, including myself. She turned to face the assembled nobles. That's what merit-based succession offers. Not chaos, opportunity. The chance for capable people to rise, regardless of birth. The chance for estates to thrive instead of decay. Her voice strengthened. You're afraid of change. I understand. But ask yourselves, are you more afraid of change or of watching everything you've built crumble because you were too proud to adapt? She sat down. The hall erupted in argument. The king raised one hand. Silence crashed down. We will hear one more witness, he announced. Lady Caroline Trask. Caroline walked to the center of the hall, her face pale but determined. Your Majesty, she began, her voice shaking. My husband inherited our estate 7 years ago. In that time, he's lost half our lands to gambling debts, driven away our most skilled workers, refused every piece of advice I've offered because I'm a woman and tradition says I have no authority. She took a breath. I've watched our people suffer, watched our legacy crumble, and I've been powerless to stop it because the law says the estate is his by right of birth, even though I could save it. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice held firm. If merit-based succession had existed, I could have petitioned for control, could have protected what's left. But instead, I have to watch everything die because tradition values his incompetence over my capability. She looked at the king. Please, Your Majesty, don't let others suffer the same fate. Change the law. Let merit matter. She collapsed into a chair, sobbing. The hall was silent. Then from the back, another voice. I'll testify too. A young man stood, Lord Pemberton's second son. My brother inherited our estate. Within 2 years, he'd alienated every ally we had. I've tried to help, but he won't listen because I'm not the heir. His voice was bitter. I'd manage it better. Everyone knows it. But tradition says I don't matter. Another voice. A widow. My husband died childless. His estate should have passed to me. Instead, it went to a distant cousin who's never even visited. Now the tenants are starving because he doesn't care. More voices, more stories. A flood of testimony from people who'd suffered under bloodline succession but had been too afraid to speak until now. The king watched, his expression shifting from stern to troubled to something else entirely. When the last witness finished, he stood. I've heard enough. The hall held its breath. Lord Ashford, you argue that bloodline succession is the foundation of our society. And you're correct. It has been for centuries. The king's voice was measured. But Duke Vorn is also correct. Foundations erode, and a wise ruler maintains what works while repairing what fails. He looked at Alistair, then at the petitioners. The decree I issued to Duke Vorn will stand. Moreover, it will be extended. Any noble family may petition for the right to choose their successor based on merit rather than birth order. These petitions will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis, with priority given to estates demonstrating need. Outrage exploded from the petitioners. This is unprecedented. This destroys everything. Enough! The king's voice cracked like thunder. I am your king. This is my decree. You will accept it or face consequences. Silence. However, he continued, this is not mandatory. Families who wish to maintain traditional succession may do so, but they will no longer have the right to challenge those who choose differently. He looked at each face in turn. We live in changing times. The kingdom that clings to the past will die. The kingdom that adapts will thrive. I choose adaptation. He brought down his staff. This hearing is concluded. Outside the hall, Elara could barely breathe. They'd won. Actually, impossibly won. Alistair leaned against the wall, his face gray with exhaustion, but his eyes blazing. We just changed the law, he said, for the entire kingdom. I know. This is going to have consequences. Massive ones. I know. He laughed, slightly hysterical. We're either heroes or the most hated people in the kingdom. Probably both. Caroline found them before they could leave. Her face was blotchy from crying, but she stood straighter than Elara had ever seen her. Thank you, she whispered. I'm filing my petition tomorrow to take control of my estate. What about your husband? He can stay or leave. I don't care anymore. She smiled, broken but real. I'm done being powerless. She walked away, and Elara felt something settle in her chest. They hadn't just changed the law, they'd changed lives. The months that followed were chaos. Petitions flooded the courts. Some noble families embraced the change, others fought it bitterly. There were protests, arguments, even a few duels. But slowly, inevitably, the kingdom began to shift. Capable heirs were chosen over incompetent ones. Women began managing estates. Second sons and daughters found opportunity where before there'd been none. The old guard raged, but their power was eroding. And at the center of it all, Vorn Estate stood as proof that the new way worked. The iron ore mines flourished under Elara's management. The estate expanded, thrived. Workers who'd been treated as disposable under the old system found themselves valued, listened to. You've built something remarkable, Alistair said one evening, reviewing the quarterly reports. We built it, Elara corrected, together. No, you did this. He gestured to the numbers, the growth. I gave you permission. You made it real. She smiled. Then we're even. 2 years after the hearing, the king summoned them again. This time, the meeting was private, just the three of them in his study. I wanted to thank you, the king said simply. What you started, it's transformed the kingdom. Not completely, not everywhere, but enough. We're stronger for it. It wasn't just us, Alistair said. Others fought too. Yes, but you struck the first blow. You proved it was possible. The king pulled out a document. I'm issuing another decree, formalizing merit-based succession as an official alternative to bloodline inheritance, making it law, not exception. He signed it with a flourish. This is your legacy, Duke Vorn, Lady Vorn. Not blood, not heirs, but change that will outlive you both. They left the palace in silence, the decree clutched in Alistair's hands. When they returned to Vorn Estate, twilight had fallen. The manor glowed warm against the darkness, lights in every window. They stood together on the steps, looking out over lands that had almost been stolen, legacy that had almost been destroyed. Do you think about it? Elara asked quietly. The children we'll never have? Sometimes. Alistair's voice was honest, but less than I used to. Why? Because I realized something. He turned to face her. I spent years thinking my value came from continuing my bloodline, from producing an heir who'd carry my name forward. But legacy isn't DNA, Elara. It's what you build, what you change, who you help. He gestured to the estate, the village beyond. We've helped hundreds of people, changed laws that will affect thousands. That matters more than any child of my blood ever could. Elara felt tears prick her eyes. I wish I'd known you before the war, before everything broke you. I wasn't worth knowing then. His smile was soft. I was arrogant, self-important. It took losing everything to figure out what actually mattered. And what's that? This, you, the fight. He took her hands. I was never broken, Elara. I was just being remade into something better. They kissed as snow began to fall, the first of winter, soft and clean. 5 years later, Alistair stood before a gathering of nobles, scholars, and merchants in the great hall of Vorn Estate. His hair had gone gray at the temples. The limp was permanent now, the cane a constant companion. But his voice was strong, his presence commanding. When I inherited this duchy, he began, I was told my lack of an heir made me weak, made me temporary, a placeholder for the inevitable collapse. He looked around the room. They were wrong. Behind him, a portrait had been unveiled. Not of himself, but of two figures, him and Elara, standing side by side, equals in every sense. My wife and I have decided on our successor, not a blood relative, not even a noble. He gestured to a young man standing nervously at the side of the room. Marcus Thorne. He started as a mine foreman, worked his way up through competence, innovation, and dedication. He knows this estate better than anyone, cares about it more deeply than lineage ever could. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some of you will call this radical, dangerous. Alistair's voice hardened. Good. Because safety is stagnation, and this estate, this legacy, was built on refusing to stagnate. He turned to Marcus. You'll inherit everything. Title, lands, responsibilities. Not because you were born to it, but because you earned it. Prove to them that merit matters, that capability trumps bloodline. Marcus stepped forward, his hands shaking but his jaw set. I'll do my best, Your Grace. I know you will. Alistair smiled. That's why you're standing here. The gathering erupted in applause, not universal but overwhelming. The old guard had lost. Merit had won. That night, as the guests departed and silence settled over the estate, Elara found Alistair in the library. He stood by the window, watching snow fall over lands that would soon belong to someone else. Any regrets? She asked softly. None. He didn't turn. Marcus will do better than I ever did. Build something I never imagined. That's what succession should be. Each generation surpassing the last, not just copying it. Elara moved to stand beside him, slipping her hand into his. We did it, she said. Everything we fought for. We did. And it nearly killed us. Multiple times. He smiled. Worth it? She thought about the battles, the fear, the night she'd been certain they'd lose everything. Then she thought about Caroline managing her own estate now, about second sons and daughters finding purpose, about a kingdom slowly learning that blood mattered less than heart. Yes, she said, worth it. They stood together as snow blanketed the world outside, transforming it into something new and clean. Behind them, on the desk, lay the final document, their will, their testament, their proof that legacy could be choice instead of curse. Alistair Vaughan had been born to privilege and expectation, but he would be remembered for breaking both. And beside him, Elara, sold into marriage, dismissed as decoration, transformed into power, had proven that the most dangerous revolutions start not with armies, but with one person deciding they deserved more. Together, they hadn't just defended a legacy. They'd redefined what legacy could mean. Not blood, not heirs, but change that would ripple through generations, touching lives they'd never meet, inspiring people who'd never know their names. They didn't leave behind children. They left behind a future. And in a world that had tried to bury them both, that was the most dangerous gift of all. Years later, when historians would write about the succession reforms, they'd trace it all back to a single moment, a crippled duke and his supposedly desperate bride, standing in a throne room, holding stolen papers, and daring the world to say they didn't deserve to exist. The world had blinked first, and nothing was ever the same. In the village below Vaughan Estate, lights flickered on as families gathered for dinner. Workers returned from the mines, their wages fair, their futures secure. Children played in streets that had once been dangerous, now protected by laws that valued people over profit. None of them knew the full story of how it had started, but all of them lived in the world it had created. And high on the hill, in a manor built by bloodlines but sustained by choice, two people who'd refused to be broken stood together and watched their legacy breathe. Not in heirs, but in change. Not in tradition, but in revolution. They had been called weak. They had been called desperate. They had been called doomed. They had been none of those things. They had been dangerous. And the world would never forget.